Fellowship Farm. Book 11, Skiing the Slopes. The Fitzgerald family rug up and head for the ski slopes in this, the 11th book of the Fellowship Farm series. Along the way, they experience the life-threatening danger of losing unity, the challenge of learning to ski, the power of prayer, and patience in the face of frustration. They meet Funny Magic, the back-to-front panda, and suffer some bruises. Their patience is well rewarded when their parents announce that a dear wish of the children is to be fulfilled. Chapter 1, A Trip to the Op Shop. "Ready!" cried Alinga Fitzgerald, bounding into the farmhouse kitchen. His cheeks glowed red from the cold Tasmanian winter air. His eyes were bright with excitement. Every other part of his body was covered with woolly winter clothes. His sisters, Lisa and Sky Marie, followed him quickly into the kitchen. "Well, that must be a new world record!" exclaimed Romy, their mother. "Are you sure you fed the pigs?" All three nodded vigorously. "And fed the farm dogs?" "Yep." "And let out the hens?" "Yep." "And fed the pigeons?" "Yep." "And fed the puppies?" "Yep. We're all done!" cried Alinga as Sky Marie delivered 8 eggs into the basket on the bench. "Let's go!" Rummy laughed and pointed to the red plastic clock on the wall above the kitchen table. The big hand was pointing to 3, and the little hand was just past the 7. Alinga screwed up his nose with concentration. "Big hand on the 3. That must be quarter past. Oh, I don't know. 7, like me. 7:30. Alinga pulled off his hat in his frustration. "Good try, Ollie," said Lisa, his 11-year-old sister. "It's 7:15. We still have 2 hours to wait." Alinga stomped off to wait impatiently by himself in the ute. But he soon grew very bored and very cold and came back inside. 2 hours finally passed and the family piled into the orange ute. Flip drove through the open farm gate and turned right down the long dirt road toward Kellyton. In summer, cars churned up clouds of dust as they passed the farm. But now, the road was wet and muddy. Flip swung to the left and right, avoiding the biggest potholes full of muddy water. Some parts of the road were flooded with a layer of water, and fountains of muddy water sprayed up and onto the windows of the car. "Go faster, Daddy!" yelled Sky, loving the water rushing at her face, safe behind the glass. After 20 minutes of muddy showers and pothole swerving, the Fitzgerald family arrived at the town. They pulled up out the front of a large op shop. The gutters were full of dirty water rushing to the drain. Alinga was in such a hurry to get out of the car and into the shop that he stepped right into the water, soaking his shoe, sock, and trousers. He thought his mummy would be cross, so he quickly stepped out of the water and onto the footpath. He hurried to walk through the op shop door before anyone could notice the water slopping from his trousers and shoe. The bells on the door jangled as Alinga heaved it open. Sue, behind the counter at the end of the shop, looked up with a smile. "Ollie!" she exclaimed. "Did you swim here?" Alinga shook his head vigorously as his family came into the shop. "Good morning, Sue," called Flip. As Robbie came into the shop, she noticed a big puddle of water forming on the mat at Alinga's feet. "So, what is the Fitzgerald family looking for today?" asked Sue. "Ski clothes!" cried Alinga as he slopped his way to the rack of brightly coloured parkas on the left-hand wall. I think we might start with a pair of pants and dry socks, Alinga Gayatri William. Yes, Mummy, said Alinga obediently, returning to his mother. Romy helped him remove his wet clothes. Lisa pulled a pair of second-hand green corduroy overalls from a nearby rack. After he had pulled them on, Alinga went to the table covered in pairs of second-hand socks and chose a pair of fluffy red ones. He pushed his cold, damp feet into the woolen cocoon. Romy took his wet shoes, socks and pants and put them in a soggy pile near the door of the shop. Thank you, Mummy, said Alinga. Now can we get ski clothes? Romy nodded. Lisa tried on a big green parka that came down to her knees and made her look like a giant green marshmallow. Sky Marie tried a purple balaclava that covered everything except her eyes and mouth. She looked like a bank robber. She chased a squealing Alinga around the shop. Flip took some thermal underwear into the change room. A few minutes later, he came out wearing woolen rainbow-striped leggings. He paraded in front of his family. Alinga started to giggle. After about an hour, 6 green bags were full of ski pants, parkas, beanies, scarves, gloves, thermal underwear and woolly socks. Sue provided an old plastic bag for the soggy clothes by the front door. Calling goodbye and thank you to Sue, the family walked carefully to the car with their clothes, avoiding the puddles and gutter full of dirty water. Alinga insisted on wearing his new orange parka on the way home in the car. As the Fitzgeralds drove toward home, he quickly started to feel very hot. He opened the window and let the cold air stream in. Ollie, shouted Sky as the wind blew sharply down her neck. Shut the window! But I'm hot, moaned Alinga. Well, take your parka off, Goosehead, said Sky, reaching across her brother to shut the window. Alinga wrestled his sister's arm away from the handle. No! Sky pressed herself against her brother and leaned towards the handle to wind it. Alinga screeched at Sky and struggled against her. Flip focused on driving on the wet and muddy road, while Romy turned around from the front seat. Ollie, Sky Marie, is this how you show your gratitude for your new clothes? Just as she spoke, Sky Marie lunged across her brother to grab the window handle. But as Ollie pushed against her, Sky's hand came down on the door handle. The door of the car swung open. Romy saw a blur of orange and green tumble from the car as Flip pressed hard on the brakes. Chapter 2, Consideration and Courtesy. As the car skidded to a stop, Sky rocked forward until the seatbelt jolted her back in her seat. Lisa looked at her mother with wide eyes and an open mouth. Romy stepped out of the car. She walked carefully to the side of the road. She picked up the green bag with Alinga's ski pants from where it had fallen into the mud. Without saying a word, she put it into the tray of the ute, shut the back door of the car, and returned to her seat at the front of the ute. Slowly and calmly, she turned to face her 3 stunned children. "Shall we reflect a little?" she asked, raising her eyebrows high. "What just happened?" "The bag fell out of the car," said Alinga. Nodded Romy. "Because the door flew open," added Sky. "Because you pulled the door handle," said Alinga, glaring at his sister. "Because you bumped me when I was trying to put the window up," said Sky. "Okay," interrupted Romy. "Do we all agree that what just happened could have been very dangerous?" Everyone nodded. "Alinga, what virtue could you have practiced that would have avoided this?" I don't know, said Alinga truthfully. What about consideration? Suggested Lisa. Consideration? Said Alinga softly. Romy nodded and turned to Sky. And you? Courtesy? Romy nodded again. And because of our lack of consideration and courtesy, what did we lose? Unity, said Sky Marie. Safety, said Lisa at the same time. Romy nodded and turned back around to face the front. Home, George, she said to Flip. Flip started the ute. Alinga slipped out of his new parka, put up the window and locked the door. The dirty water sprayed dramatically against the windows as the children sat silently for the rest of the journey home. Back at the farmhouse, the children were excited to put on the ski clothes they already had, together with the new items they bought at the op shop. Alinga's ski pants just needed a sponge down from their roll in the mud. When he came into the kitchen where Flip was preparing lunch, Flip covered his eyes with his hand and staggered around, pretending to be blind. Wow, you are one great big safety colour, son, he said, giving the orange marshmallow man a hug. We won't lose you on the mountain. Alinga grinned. He couldn't wait to be on the mountain, making a snowman, tobogganing, and learning to ski for the first time. Just one more sleep. That afternoon, the family continued to prepare for their journey to the mountain. Flip and Sky Marie took the ute up to the shed. In the shed, they found the snow chains which they would need when they got to the icy parts of the mountain road. The chains were covered in dust and spiders' webs. Sky Marie brushed them down. Flip practiced putting them on the tires. Then he plunked them in a box on the tray of the ute. In the farmhouse, Lisa and Romy cooked a quiche and some sausages, which they would take cold the next day. They also made soup, which they would take hot in a big thermos. Alinga packed other food into a big box. Fruit, crackers, little yogurts, muesli bars, and best of all, blocks of chocolate. Lisa filled old juice bottles with water and added them to the food box. Some spare socks, underwear, tracksuits, pants, skivvies, and jumpers were folded into a carry bag. At the end of the day, if they were cold and wet, it might be good to change into dry clothes for the trip home. And on the very top of the bag were a camera, a purse, and the car keys. After evening chores, dinner, showers, and prayers, it was time for bed. How badly Lisa, Sky Marie, and Alinga wanted the morning to come. How hard they tried to go to sleep quickly. And how difficult it was to calm down with the excitement of the journey to the snow, leaping and dancing around in their minds. Chapter 3. The Journey Begins. It was very dark and cold outside the farmhouse when Lisa, Sky Marie, and Alinga climbed out of their beds at 5 o'clock the next morning. They were very happy to pull on their ski clothes and join their parents in the living room for prayers. Normally, they would light the fire in the morning, but today the fire was cold in its grate. There was no point lighting it. The family would be on its way in half an hour. They read and chanted prayers and writings. Then, as it was so early and cold, dark and scary, Romy and Lisa attended to the morning chores in the ute. They fed the pigs who were barely awake. They drove up the hill from the pigsty to where the farm dogs were tied to their kennels near the shed. They were definitely awake. They were very happy to have an early breakfast. They barked and strained on their chains as Lisa took the bones from the shed fridge. The chickens, who were normally in a rush to get out of the shed, were still nestled on their perches, waiting for sunrise. While Romy and Lisa fed the pigeons and puppies behind the farmhouse, Flip strapped the food box and the clothes bag down on the back of the ute. He stretched a blue tarpaulin across the tray to protect it from rain. Sky helped him attach the elastic rope to the hooks around the outside wall of the tray. In the cabin of the ute, he put the green bag that held their breakfast. At 6:10, Romy turned out the lights and shut the door of the house. She joined the rest of the excited family in the ute. Their breath made thick clouds in the torchlight as they waited for the car heater to warm up the air. Romy started the engine of the ute. Their 3-hour journey from Fellowship Farm by the sea to the top of Ben Lomond began. As the car warmed up, many of the layers of clothes were removed. Soon, the floor of the ute had a bright covering of hats, gloves, scarves, jackets, and jumpers. Empty tummies started to rumble. "What's for breakfast, Daddy?" asked Lisa from the middle of the back seat. Let's see," said Flip, pulling the bag from the floor to his lap and peering through the early morning darkness. "Looks like dry bread, moldy cheese, frog's ears, snake bladders, and slime. Who's hungry?" Sky Marie was already feeling slightly carsick. Her dad's breakfast menu made her feel even worse. She pulled her parka off the floor and leaned her head against the side of the car. She hoped she would fall asleep. Her tummy was starting to swirl in slow, gurgling circles. "Slime, please," said Alinga. "Ah, a very brave boy, said Flip, and handed Alinga a banana and cheese sandwich. "Frog's ears, please," said Lisa. An excellent choice, exclaimed Flip, and passed Lisa a peanut butter and honey sandwich and an apple. "Why do you have to say everything twice, Dad?" moaned Sky. Well, you may ask, replied Flip. Your question reminds me of a story. In the time of Abdul-Baha, there was a very dedicated, very wise Baha'i called Mirza Abdul Fazl. Abdul-Baha loved and trusted him very much. Mirza Abdul Fazl traveled from Persia to America to teach people about Baha'u'llah. He also helped the Baha'is learn more about their faith. Sometimes, when he was explaining tricky ideas, he repeated himself. So imagine if he wanted to teach them that 6 times 3 is 18. He might say, 6 times 3 is 18. So you see, 3 times 6 is 18. So 6 lots of 3 equals 18, which means that if you have 3 piles of 6 oranges, you have 18 oranges. I think you can see now that 6 times 3 is 18. One day, after one of his talks, one of the Baha'is walked up to him. Courteously, she explained that Americans are very smart. She said, "You really don't need to repeat yourself so much. If you do, people might get cross with you." Mirza Abdul Fazl humbly thanked the woman. He explained, "I was just trying to be clear." Then he said, "I just have one question. What was I repeating in my talk?" The woman thought and thought. Then she said, "Oh, I can't remember." Mirza Abdul Fazl smiled and said, "You see, ma'am, this is why I repeat myself." Chapter 4: The First Snow. As the car warmed up, the bellies filled with food, and the story ended, eyelids began to droop. All but Romy dozed as the family drove along the highway to Launceston, and then up the windy bush roads to the foot of the mountain. In the early morning sunlight, Romy turned off the sealed road onto the dirt road leading up the mountain. The mountain road was rough and bumpy. The children and Flip were bumped and jolted awake. Sky, who usually got very carsick, had managed to avoid it so far by sleeping. As she woke, she started to feel queasy. "Is it okay with everyone if I open my window?" she asked. "Then we'll be cold," said Alinga. "I'm feeling really carsick," explained Sky. "Okay then," said Alinga. "I guess if we get cold, we can put our parkas back on." "Thank you for your consideration, Ollie, and courtesy, Sky Marie," smiled Romy, looking at them in the rearview mirror. "Do you want to come and sit up the front, Possum?" asked Flip. Sky shook her head. She opened her window and leaned her head out. The wind was freezing cold. It took her breath away. She ducked back in, gasping. Then she took a big breath and stuck her head out again. "You can start looking out for snow," said Romy. All eyes turned to the road and cloud-covered mountain looming above them. The car wound its way up the mountain. Straining to be the first one to see snow, the children just saw rocks, scraggy bushes, and occasional trees. Suddenly, Lisa cried, "Snow!" On the side of the road, there were small patches of white powder, full of sparkling crystals. Alinga wanted to get out and play straight away, but his sisters convinced him to be patient and wait until they reached the ski slopes. As they drove higher and higher, the snow got thicker. The cloud also got thicker. Romy put on the headlights and drove very slowly. As they got closer to the summit, other cars came into sight. Some of them had pulled over to the side of the road. Soon, Romy did the same. "Why are we stopping, Mummy?" asked Alinga. "We need to put the chains on the tires," answered Flip. "How come?" "The chains stop us slipping on the steep and icy parts of the road." When Flip had put the chains on the wheels, Romy pulled back onto the road. Lisa looked out the front window of the car. She saw a long, narrow road winding with tight corners up Ben Lomond. "That part of the road is called Jacob's Ladder, Ollie. It's really scary." Romy slowed the car and headed up Jacob's Ladder. On one side of the road was a steep drop down the mountain. On the other was the mountain itself, reaching up to the sky. As Romy drove carefully round each hairpin bend, the children started to sing some prayers. "Armed with the power of thy name, nothing can ever hurt me," they sang in harmony. "And with thy love in my heart, all the world's afflictions can in no wise alarm me." Looking down the steep slope of the mountain, the children saw an old rusty car that must have fallen off the road some years before and rolled down the rocks. They wondered if anyone had been hurt. As they reached the top of the very windy and steep road, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They gave Romy a big clap and cheer. "Thank you for your encouragement and enthusiasm," laughed Romy. Soon they pulled into the area where several other cars were parked. The parking lot was covered in dirty snow. At the edge of the car park, where cars and people didn't go, the snow was clean and white. The Fitzgeralds pulled on their boots, jumpers, parkas, scarves, hats and gloves and stepped out of the warm car into freezing cold mountain air. Alinga rushed over to a pile of fresh snow and tried to make a snowball. The snow did not stick together well and fell through the fingers of his gloves. Turning to Lisa to ask for help, he suddenly realized that his family was already halfway up the car park. He ran to join them and followed them up some wooden steps leading to a path. At the top of the steps, the path branched left and right. To the left was a row of wooden buildings. Some were small, and others were 2 stories high and very large. To the right, the path led to an office. The path then continued to a large building where visitors to the mountain could buy food and rent skis and toboggans. And at the very end of the path was a small building with a window from which skiers could buy tickets to use the lifts. The Fitzgeralds turned right. "What are all those houses?" asked Alinga, pointing behind them. "That's where people stay if they are sleeping up here. Some of them belong to families, and some of them are cabins people rent for the night." "Oh, can we sleep in one of those?" "No, darling, it's too expensive. We need to drive home tonight," replied Romy. Alinga knew this was time to practice gratitude, not greediness, so he quickly focused on the wonderful opportunity to spend the whole day on the mountain. He hurried along the path to the place where the Fitzgeralds would rent skis. Chapter 5, Magic Michael, the back-to-front panda. The first thing the children saw when they went through the door was a big hole in the cement floor. It looked like an empty rectangular swimming pool, deeper than Alinga was tall. In the hole was a young man. He was wearing ski overalls and a t-shirt. His face was very brown, but he had big white circles around his eyes. Sky thought he looked like a back-to-front panda. He grinned at the family as they came in and called out, "Hello there, my first customers of the day. You renting ski boots and poles?" "Poles?" thought Alinga to himself. "Why would we want poles?" But Alinga didn't speak. He was trying to figure out why the man had white patches around his eyes. "Yes, please," said Flip. Along the side of the hole, there were 4 plastic seats bolted to the ground. "Take a seat," said the man. "My name is Michael. People call me Magic. I'll be fitting you with your gear today. We'll start with you, my lovely," he said, smiling at Lisa. "What size is your foot?" Lisa answered him and slipped off her red gumboot to reveal a red woolen sock. He reached for a pair of heavy white plastic boots with big clips down the front. Lisa slipped her foot inside. Magic closed the buckles and Lisa nodded to let him know it felt comfortable. "Now, are you a bit of a professional skier?" he asked with a twinkle in his eye. "Because if you are, we'll get you some longer skis." "Beginner," said Lisa. Magic raised his eyebrows high. "Oh," he said, and reached for some shorter skis. He attached them to the boots and showed Lisa how to do it herself. Then he measured a couple of ski poles against her body and passed them to her. "You're all done, love. Just carry your skis and poles over there while you wait for the rest of this mob." Lisa clumped over to the corner in her heavy ski boots. It was hard to walk, and Lisa thought she might fall over and drop her skis and poles. But she made it. Sky was next. While Magic fitted Sky's boots, he chatted and joked and made Sky laugh. She quickly felt very comfortable, and so she asked him the question that Alinga had been thinking about. "Why do you have white patches around your eyes?" Sky looked at Flip to see if it was okay to ask Magic this question. Flip smiled at Sky and nodded. "Well, my father was human and my mother was a panda," said Magic with a straight face. Alinga's mouth dropped open. Sky started to giggle. Then Magic explained that during the winter he lived on the mountain. Some days he worked fitting people with rental skis, and many days he skied all day. He explained that the sun reflecting off the snow made his face go brown. Then he pulled some ski goggles out of his pocket and put them on. The children saw that the white patches were completely covered by the goggles. "So you see, the sun doesn't get to the skin around my eyes, so I end up with white patches." "Cool," said Sky, turning to Romy. "Can we rent some goggles?" Romy nodded. When everyone had been fitted with skis, boots, poles and goggles, they stomped outside to the snow. Just outside the building was a large, gently sloping area of snow, surrounded by a bright yellow plastic fence. In front of the fence was a large sign. "Beginner ski lessons, 9:30 till 10:30, 10:30 till 11:30, 11:30 till 12:30. Flip, Romy, Lisa and Sky Marie had skied before, but it was Alinga's first time. "Perhaps Ollie should have a lesson to get him started," suggested Romy. "No, I want to go up the mountain," cried Alinga. "I can ski. I don't need a lesson." "Okay, darling," said Romy. "Let's have a go. Let's put your skis on and head to the hut over there to buy a ticket for the ski lifts." Everyone put their skis flat on the snow. They put the toe of their boot into the clasp on the ski and pushed down, clipping their skis on, just as Magic had taught them. Romy and Flip showed the children how to ski up the gentle slope to the hut. Within seconds, Alinga and Sky had tumbled onto the snow. They pulled themselves up and kept trying. No sooner had they gone a little way up the slope than they both started to slide backwards. "Ah!" cried Alinga as he slid back to where he had started and fell over again. "Keep trying, Ollie," called Lisa, turning and sliding forwards down the little slope to help him get up. Ollie and Sky tried to stand back up on their skis, but they kept slipping and falling. In the end, they unclipped their boots from their skis, put the skis flat on the snow, and stepped back into them. But as soon as they turned the skis up the slope toward the ticket hut, they slid backwards and fell into a pile of snow. Ollie was frowning and frustrated. Sky was laughing at herself and her brother and trying to get him to see the funny side. "How about those lessons?" suggested Flip, reaching out a hand to each child and pulling them to their feet. Ollie nodded. Flip helped Ollie slip and slide over to where a few other children were waiting for the 9:30 lesson. Sky eventually made her own way over. "We'll go buy lift tickets and have some runs, possums," said Flip with a smile. "Then we'll meet you back here and take you for a ski, okay?" Ollie and Sky smiled and nodded. The instructors were sliding over to the group now, so the children lined up with the others and turned to them. They were wearing black ski pants with a bright green parka. On the back of their parkas was written, in big black letters, "Instructor." They both had brown faces with white patches around their eyes, just like Magic. "Hi, everyone!" One of the instructors greeted the group loudly so everyone could hear. "I'm Margaret, and this is Steve. We'll be your instructors today." Ollie tried to concentrate, but he couldn't stop looking at the ring in Margaret's nose and eyebrow. He wondered if it hurt to have your nose and eyebrow pierced. Chapter 6, A Long Wait. The lesson was so much fun, and the hour passed so quickly that when Ollie and Sky looked up and saw Flip, Romy and Lisa behind the fence, they were both surprised and disappointed. Margaret thanked everyone for their great work and high-fived all the children in the group. "Oh, that was so much fun!" said Ollie, sliding over to his family and stopping himself by making a V with his skis. Nice snowplow, son, said Flip with a grin. Can we have another lesson, please? Flip looked at Romy. Romy shrugged her shoulders, nodded and said, why not? So Ollie and Sky stayed for another hour while Romy, Flip and Lisa went back up the mountain. Just as the lesson started, Ollie turned to see them disappearing in the distance, being pulled up the mountain by the poma. The second lesson was the same as the first one, but with a new group of children. Margaret referred to Ollie and Sky as her experts and asked them to demonstrate as she once again taught the basics of skiing. Ollie and Sky felt very proud. Once again, the hour passed quickly. As Margaret high-fived the participants at the end, Ollie and Sky saw Flip, Romy and Lisa ski down past the ticket hut to the lesson area. Ollie and Sky said, "Thank you very much, Margaret," and then skied smoothly over to their family and stopped without falling over. "Wee-hoo!" cried Lisa as she saw their new skiing ability. "Well done," smiled Romy. "Can we go in the poma now, Mummy?" asked Alinga. "How about some food first, and then we'll all go out for a ski together." Everyone thought food was a great idea. Outside the building where the family had rented skis, there were racks for skis and poles. They unclipped their skis and put them in the racks. Then, feeling like big, clumping robots in their ski boots, they stomped inside. As they went in, they took off their hats and mittens and tucked them into their jackets. They hung their jackets on one of the many hooks by the door. They walked past the big hole in the floor where Magic was fitting more people with skis, boots and poles, and into a large room with a wooden floor and lots of tables and benches. The floor was covered in puddles of water where snow had fallen off people's boots and melted. 3 of the tables were occupied. The Fitzgeralds smiled at the other people as they walked past them to a table by the window. The table was covered in a big plastic cover with bright yellow daisies on it. The window looked down the mountain, away from the ski slopes. The land and the sky were white, and it was hard to tell where one started and the other finished. In one corner of the room was a microwave, so Romy took the quiche and sausages and put them in the microwave for 3 minutes. Flip served the soup still hot from the thermos, and soon the only sound from the Fitzgerald table was the munching of food. Everyone was ravenously hungry. After lunch was gobbled up and the containers were put away in the bag, the Fitzgeralds headed for the door. As they put their hats, mittens, jackets and goggles back on, Lisa, Sky Marie and Alinga were bursting with excitement. They wanted to get straight back out to the snow. How they wished they could stay for more than one day. But at least they had the rest of the day to ski. They didn't want to waste 1 minute. When Alinga and Sky Marie had their jackets zipped up, Flip gave them each a piece of wire and a green sticker in the shape of a triangle. They threaded the wire through the hole in their zipper and stuck the sticker onto the wire. This was their lift pass that Romy and Flip had purchased for them earlier. With that sticker, they would be allowed to ride the poma. Just as the family was heading out the heavy wooden door, a tall man and woman were coming in. They were in matching white and navy blue ski suits, white hats and white ski gloves. Lisa could tell they didn't buy their clothes from the op shop. As they passed the children, they smiled politely, but when they saw Romy, they exclaimed, "Romy?" Romy looked up and with a big grin said, "Marty, Bob!" The tall man and the woman hugged Romy. Romy quickly introduced the children, then said, "You remember my husband, Flip?" The couple nodded, as if trying to remember Flip. The adults started talking and the children waited patiently. When the talking went on and on, the children decided to put on their skis and go up to the Poma line to wait there. They whispered to Flip and he nodded. The children were happy to be out on the snow again. Ollie and Sky Marie proudly showed how well they could ski up the gentle slope to the Poma. The line was not too long. Many skiers had headed to the cafeteria or their cabins for lunch. By the time the children were at the front of the line, their parents were still talking to the couple in the doorway. The children stepped out of the way and let the next person pass. And the next, and the next, and the next. "Oh, come on, Mum," said Sky, though she knew only Lisa and Alinga could hear her. The children were itching to learn to use the Poma and have a ski on the gentle slopes at the front of the mountain. 15 minutes passed, and the children pulled out of the line and went to slide around on the patch of snow near the Poma. The engine of the ski lift was very noisy. The diesel fumes smelt like the tractor on the farm. The children soon grew bored and wished out loud that their parents would hurry up. It felt like hours later when Romy and Flip finally said goodbye to the couple and skied up to the children near the start of the Poma. "Mum," said Alinga, "we've been waiting for ages." Even Lisa was feeling impatient and cross. Romy and Flip saw the cross faces of their children, but they matched them with huge, radiant smiles. "Sorry, darlings," said Romy, "but I think you'll be glad you had to wait a few minutes when you hear what we were talking about with Marty and Bob." "What was it?" asked Sky, curious. "Let's get skiing and we'll talk about it later," replied Romy, and headed for the line. Impatience was forgotten as the Fitzgerald family followed Romy to the Poma line. The line was very short now, so they only had to wait a moment before it was their turn to ride the Poma. Chapter 7: A Crash. Running from the bottom of the mountain to halfway up the front slope was a long wire held up by metal pillars, like telegraph poles. All along the wire, a few meters apart, there were long plastic poles hanging down almost to the ground. On the bottom of each pole was a little circle of plastic. Ollie watched as the person before him put the pole between his legs and rested his bottom on the plastic circle. Then he saw that as the wire moved, it pulled the plastic pole forward and the person skied along, going up the mountain. It looked very easy. Ollie stood in place and waited for the Poma to come around the corner. The Pomas going up the mountain were pulling people. But once the people got off up the top of the mountain, the Pomas came down empty. As the next one swung around the corner and came toward Ollie, he reached out and tried to grab it. But when he tried to put it between his legs, he lost his balance. Ollie fell over and the Poma went springing forward and up the mountain. "Whoops," said Ollie and got up again. He reached for the next one, got it between his legs, but his skis were facing off to the left, so when the Poma pulled him forward, he tipped over. Once again, the Poma went springing forward and on up the mountain. Flip slid forward and helped Ollie to his feet. "Good opportunity to practice determination, eh, Ollie boy?" And Ollie nodded. He stood with his skis facing straight forward. Flip grabbed the Poma and put it between Ollie's legs so his bottom was resting on the round disc. "Hold on tight, son," called Flip as Ollie was pulled forward, first jerkily, then more smoothly up the mountain. The rest of the family caught the Pomas after Ollie, and soon they were all halfway up the mountain on a flat piece of snow. Over to the side and above where they stood, they could see steeper slopes. Experienced skiers flew down the slopes, even jumping over small cliffs. "Wow, look at that!" said Sky Marie, pointing to a girl skiing quickly down the top of the mountain, which seemed to go straight down without even a slope. Then they turned to the gentle slope below them, leading down to the start of the Poma and to the ticket hut. The children felt a surge of excitement. "Ready?" called Romy. 4 brightly coloured woolen hats nodded yes. Romy pushed off gently and began to cut across the front of the mountain, doing a snowplow. When she had crossed the slope, she turned and came slowly back the other way, snaking her way down the mountain. Lisa went next. She copied Romy. Then it was Ollie's turn. The slope was a little steeper than it looked, and Ollie found himself rushing a little faster than he expected, but he loved it. He successfully manoeuvred his first turn and was crossing back over the slope when he heard a loud "Yee!" Sky Marie had pushed off too hard and was charging down the mountain. Instead of big, slow curves, Sky was rushing almost straight down. Sky started to panic and her mind went blank. She could hear that her family was yelling advice, but it was all just a blur of sound. She could see people skiing on the slope below her and wondered if she would crash into them. For a second, Sky Marie wondered if she was about to die. Suddenly she cried out, "Yabahola Pa!" And as she said the prayer, she sat down hard on the snow. One ski flew off and she spun around onto her back. Her body slid for a few meters down the mountain and then stopped. The ski that had come off went sliding down the slope, stopping way below where people were lined up to ride the Poma. Sky looked up into the white sky. She felt bruised and sore on her bottom and on the back of her head. Within a few seconds, Flip and Romy were at her side. After some time, they helped her to slowly sit up. "You okay, Possum?" Flip asked. A couple of tears trickled down Sky's cheeks. "Yep," she nodded slowly. "Nothing broken?" asked Romy. Sky started to unclip the remaining ski and slowly push herself up to a stand. She shook her head in answer to Romy's question. As she gently dusted herself off, Alinga and Lisa skied over. "You okay, sister?" asked Lisa. "Look at your ski. It's already in the lineup for the Poma." Sky looked at Romy. "How am I going to get down the mountain on one ski?" "You wait here," replied Romy. "I'll bring it to you." Romy went sliding off down the mountain, making occasional turns with perfect control. When she reached the bottom of the slope, she picked up Sky's ski and put it under her arm. A few minutes later, she was sliding past the family on her way back up the mountain. The children waved as she slid past. Soon after she slid past, being pulled by the Poma, Romy appeared on the slope and slid quickly down towards them. She turned just as she reached them, sending a little spray of snow onto Flip's legs. "Hey, watch it!" Flip raised his eyebrows and bared his teeth at Romy. Sky took the ski from Romy and attached it to her boot. "Ready to get back on the horse, Sky?" asked Romy with a wink. Sky nodded. Slowly she pushed off and, together with the rest of her family, wound her way carefully down the slope with her skis in the shape of a big V. Chapter 8. Exciting News. The rest of the afternoon was full of riding Pomas, falling off Pomas, getting up, falling down, tears, laughter, bruises, determination, exhilaration, courage, fear, victory, encouragement, and fun. At 4:30, they lined up for their last ride up the mountain, as the Poma was going to stop running after that. By their last run down the mountain, all the children felt confident and comfortable. They raced each other to the bottom. Romy and Flip raced down after them and pulled to a stop with a spray of snow across the children. "Time to take our skis back," smiled Romy. Lisa, Sky and Alinga's hearts were full of gratitude for the wonderful day of skiing. They were also full of longing, wishing they didn't have to leave. "Thank you for a wonderful day," said Lisa. "Yes, thank you," said Sky and Alinga. "You're welcome, possums," said Flip. "We honour your gratitude." The family skied slowly down past the ticket hut until they arrived at the building where they had rented their skis and eaten their lunch. They unclipped their skis and carried them in. It felt strange to be clumping clumsily instead of gliding freely. Inside, the cafeteria smelt of hot chocolate and hot meat pies. The children's tummies rumbled loudly. They walked over to the big hole in the ground. Magic smiled up at them. "So, how did you go?" "Great," said Alinga. "When I'm old like you, I'm going to get a job here too. I want to ski every day, all day." "Good one," grinned Magic, taking their skis, boots and poles, one by one. Their socks were wet with sweat and melted snow, so they flopped over to the tables and sat down to change into dry socks before they put their gumboots back on. Their mittens and hats and skivvies were also damp with sweat. As they put on their gumboots, Ollie looked out the window. The sun had set and darkness was falling over the mountain. "Oh, I wish we could stay for another day," he said without thinking, and then quickly put his hand over his mouth. Alinga knew that he should be grateful, not greedy. "Oh, it just popped out," he said. "Thank you for a lovely day, Mummy. Thank you, Daddy." "You're welcome, darling. Now, would you like to know what we were talking about with Marty and Bob?" The children nodded. Romy explained that Marty and Bob were friends of her parents who lived in Hobart. Marty and Bob owned one of the cabins on the mountain. In fact, they had owned it for more than 20 years and used to bring their children here when they still lived at home. Now the children were grown, there were a couple of spare bedrooms in the cabin. Marty and Bob had invited the Fitzgerald family to stay with them in their cabin. 6 little eyes opened wide and 3 little mouths dropped open. "So we said no thanks. Our children would like to get back to the farm tonight," said Flip. "Dad," said Lisa, but she knew her dad was joking. "So, are we really going to sleep in the cabin in the snow tonight?" said Alinga, jumping up in his dry socks and landing in a big puddle of water. Romy nodded. "Would you like to?" She was suddenly swamped by hugging arms and grinning faces. Struggling under the sea of arms, Romy continued, "We won't be able to rent skis tomorrow, as we can only afford that for one day." "But we could build a snow woman," exclaimed Sky. "Yes, and we can hire toboggans," added Romy. The children thought they would burst from excitement. They talked over the top of each other, sharing ideas and plans for the night and day ahead. Just then, Marty appeared at the doorway of the dining room. "Hi, Romy," she said and smiled at everyone else. "Bob's got the pasta cooking. If anyone's hungry, you're welcome to come on over now." Everyone quickly finished putting their socks and boots on. They pushed their arms back into the parkas, which now felt cold and soggy. "Yuck," said Sky Marie. Feeling rather uncomfortable in their cold, wet ski gear, the Fitzgeralds followed Marty down the path and up the other side to the cabins. The path was lit up by some lampposts. The snow in the lamplight shone like crystal. The path took them over a small wooden bridge. Under the bridge was a stream. In the lamplight, the children could see that whole sections of the stream were frozen solid. They looked forward to having a play there tomorrow. When they arrived at the cabin, The smell of pasta and pesto filled their nostrils. Everyone took their boots off outside and carried them in. Marty showed them a little room near the front door, which was extra warm and dry. She showed them where to hang their parkas, hats, mittens, socks and boots, and explained that this was the drying room. "By tomorrow morning, your clothes will be dry and warm again," she explained. "When you've had your shower, you can bring your ski pants and hang them here too." Lisa was the first in the shower. The warm water rushing over her cold, damp, bruised and tired body felt delicious. All her muscles were aching. Some of them she had rarely used before. She felt she could stay in the warm waterfall all night. But she knew others were waiting, so she quickly washed and stepped out. On the wooden floor was a fluffy mat, and warm air was blowing from a vent in the corner of the room. Lisa toweled herself down with the big green towel Marty had given her. She then pulled on the spare clothes they had brought to change into for the drive home. Ollie, Sky, Flip, and then Rummy also quickly washed and dressed. Lisa hung her wet ski pants in the drying room. She came into the living room, which was connected to the kitchen, where Bob and Marty were preparing dinner. "Can I help?" she asked. "Yes," replied Marty through a mouthful of carrot. She showed Lisa the drawer with placemats and napkins and indicated for Lisa to set the table. One by one, the rest of the Fitzgeralds hung their wet ski pants and came into the living room. 2 walls were made of windows looking down and across the mountain away from the ski slopes. It was completely dark now, so Bob pulled the wooden shutters and shut the curtains to keep in the heat. When Rummy joined them, Bob said, "Let's eat." There were no arguments. The wooden table was set for 7. There were not quite enough chairs, so one place had a metal garbage bin with a cushion on top instead of a chair. "I would offer to sit on the bin," said Bob, "but I would probably squish it flat like an old Coke can. So Alinga, would you mind sitting on that? You look like the lightest." Alinga was very happy to sit on the bin, so long as he didn't fall in. In the middle of the table was a bowl full of salad and a big steaming pot of pasta. The children felt like they had never been so hungry in all their lives. Chapter 9, Who's Who? After 2 big bowls of pasta and salad and a bowl of ice cream, all tummies were very full. "Why don't you go have a look in the bedroom cupboards?" suggested Bob. "Our children had a lot of board games which we still haven't given away. You might find something fun to play." The children cleared the table and thanked Bob and Marty for a delicious dinner. They were very happy to explore the cupboards. As they opened the bedroom door, they heard Marty remark to Flip and Rummy that they were delightful children. Rummy started to talk about spiritual education, and soon the adults were deep in conversation. In the bedroom, the children found shelves full of games. There was Chinese checkers, Monopoly, the game of life, an old dartboard and some darts, Uno cards, Who's Who, and a lot of other games. They decided to play Who's Who. Sky Marie went first. She picked a card with a face on it. The face had black skin, brown eyes, long hair, a beard, moustache, and a hat. Lisa opened her tray with rows of different faces and started to ask questions. "Is it female?" "No." Lisa pushed down half of her faces. "Does it have a moustache?" "Yes." Lisa pushed down another 8 faces. Lisa kept asking questions until the only face left standing on her tray had black skin, brown eyes, long hair, a beard, moustache, and a hat. She showed Sky. "Correct!" Alinga's turn was next, but when the girls finished their game, They noticed that Alinga was curled up like a little wombat on the floor near the bed, fast asleep. They lifted him into one of the beds that Marty and Bob had prepared for the children. Lisa and Sky sat on the edge of Alinga's bed and sang him some prayers while he slept. From the living room, the girls could hear the sounds of Flip telling one of his funny stories and the others laughing. They put away the games and climbed into the other beds. It was still very early, but after their early start and very busy, active day, the girls were already starting to feel sleepy. As they lay in their beds, Lisa said to Sky, "Let's play high-low." "What's high-low?" asked Sky Marie. Lisa explained that at school, every Monday morning her class played high-low. Each student had a chance to say what was the highlight of their weekend and what was the lowlight, what was best and what was worst. Through this game, Lisa had lots of opportunities to talk about the Baha'i faith to her teachers and classmates. Often Lisa's highlight of the weekend was a holy day, 19-day feast, a Yamaha, or a children's class. "Okay," said Sky Marie. "You go first." My high was everything. Having breakfast in the car, skiing all day long, getting to sleep on the mountain. My low was your accident at the start of the day." "Same," said Sky. "My high was everything, even my accident. You know, as soon as I said Ya Baha, I knew what I had to do. Just sit down. So even that was a good experience. My low was having to put my soggy, cold parka, mittens and hat back on to walk to the cabin." Sky Marie let out a big yawn, and Lisa followed. They pulled the curtains back from the window and looked out. There were no stars to be seen. The night sky was dark and cloudy. As Lisa drifted off to sleep, she wondered if it might snow tomorrow. By the time Flip and Romy had finished their conversation, washed the dishes and came to say goodnight to their children, Lisa, Sky and Alinga were fast asleep. As always, Sky had kicked her blanket onto the floor and Alinga was buried down under his. They were all dreaming of flying down the mountain on super-fast skis. Chapter 10, Dawn and the Snow Woman. The children stirred eagerly, and for a few minutes they could not work out where they were. There were no familiar sights, sounds, or smells. The bedroom felt unusually warm, and everything was silent. Slowly they fully woke up and remembered the wonderful adventure of the day before, and the promise of more that day. They had a quick whispered consultation and then quietly padded out to the drying room. As Marty had promised, their soggy ski clothes from the day before were dry and warm. They took them back into the bedroom and turned on the light. They took off the clothes they had worn to bed and pulled on the ski clothes. When they were dressed, they tiptoed to the front door of the cabin. They quietly opened the cabin door, and before stepping out, they put on their gumboots. Outside was still dark. The lamps shone on the path in front of the cabins, but the rest of the mountain was hidden in the darkness. "Look!" Sky pointed. In the light of the lamps, the children could see little flakes of snow falling gently to the ground. "It's snowing!" exclaimed Alinga in a loud whisper. The children bent over to gather the newly fallen snow into a ball. The snow stuck together well when they pressed it firmly. "Let's make a snow woman," Sky suggested. Alinga and Lisa agreed. In the lamplight, the children rolled and pressed the snow on the path until they had 3 small balls to use as a base, middle, and head for their snow woman. They were just putting the balls on top of each other when the cabin door opened and Romy stuck her head out. I thought I might find the escapees here," she said to Flip, who was standing behind her. "Look, Mummy," called Ollie gently. "It's snowing, and we're making a snow woman." "Beautiful, darling. Marty and Bob are still sleeping, so keep playing quietly. When they wake up, we'll have some breakfast." As the children worked on their snow woman, they noticed that lights were starting to come on in the cabins all along the path. The balls of snow were firmly balanced on each other. It was time to look for eyes, a nose, arms, and buttons for their snow woman. The sun was just beginning to rise, which made it easier to find some twigs and stones to stick into the snow. Lisa had just put 2 stones from the creek at the bottom of the biggest ball to make feet when the cabin door opened. "Come look at what we made, Dad," called Alinga. Flip came outside in his bare feet, hopping from one to the other in the cold snow. "Very creative," said Flip, making steamy puffs with every breath. "Now, how about some breakfast, possums?" Flip turned and hip-hopped back into the cabin. The children admired their work and then followed their bouncing father. Inside the cabin, Marty and Romy were cooking some porridge and making toast. During the winter, Marty and Bob stayed at the cabin on the mountain for weeks at a time. They would go to Launceston about once a week to get groceries, so they only had very limited supplies of fruit and fresh vegetables. But they had plenty of food that could easily be stored or frozen, like pasta, porridge, and bread, and were happy to share. As the children sat up at the table, Romy served them each a big bowl of steaming porridge. The children added a big dollop of honey each and poured lots of milk on top. The milk helped cool the porridge down. Even so, in her rush, Sky Marie burnt her tongue on the hot mush. She could hardly taste the honey or the creamy milk after that. After her porridge, Lisa ate 2 pieces of toast with Vegemite. She really wanted another piece, but she worried that Marty and Bob might think she was greedy. But when Alinga got full halfway through his second piece of toast, Lisa was quick to offer to help out. When they had finished, the children cleared the table and washed the dishes. "After prayers, can we go out in the snow?" asked Sky, wrapping her arms around her mother, who was still sitting on the table with Flip, Marty and Bob. "Yes, we will." Sky turned to Marty and Bob and said, "We always have prayers in the morning. Would you like to join us for some prayers?" Bob looked a bit surprised, but Marty said, "We'd love to. What do you do?" "Well, we normally have prayer books and the guitar, but we didn't bring them up the mountain because we didn't plan to stay the night. So, we could just sit around the table and sing some prayers." "That sounds great," said Marty. "It might do us some good, Bob." Bob looked doubtful. He asked Sky, "Why do you pray, Sky?" Sky explained that there are 2 reasons they pray. First of all, because we love God, just like you love Marty. So you want to talk to her and listen to her. And because we love God, we want to talk to God and listen to God. And also, because prayer is like food for our soul. We have porridge for our bodies and prayers for our soul. Bob looked very impressed. "Well, let's have some soul porridge then," he laughed. The children nodded and sat themselves back down at the table. "Oh my God, oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose." Romy started to sing, and the rest of the family joined in. The Fitzgeralds sang many prayers while Marty and Bob listened. After they had finished, the children went off to brush their teeth and gather their belongings together. When they were ready to go, they came back to the living room. Marty and Bob had given the family some peanut butter sandwiches and filled the thermos with hot chocolate for lunch. The Fitzgeralds still had some food left over from the day before as well, so they knew they would have plenty to eat. The Fitzgeralds thanked Marty and Bob very much for inviting them to stay. They slipped their feet into their gumboots. As they left the cabin, they walked past their little snow woman and admired her. The family headed towards the building where they had rented skis and had lunch the day before. This was where they would hire their toboggans. This was where their new adventure would begin. But that is another story.